Welcome to the Hustler's Manifesto podcast. We jailbreak from toxic hustle culture. We take Hustler back from a belief that bigger is better, security is contingent on compliance, and freedom is reserved for the powerful. I'm your host, Sarah Duran. I'm not here to tell you how to make a quick buck. I'm here to change the way work is done so that we can live more meaningful lives right now instead of betting on an uncertain future. If you value this content, please rate it and comment on this podcast wherever you get it. If you're a freelancer, consultant, or solopreneur who needs better strategy for your business, learn more about what I do at fruitioninitiatives.com. Thanks for being part of the movement. Hi, Laura.
Hello there. How you doing?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
It is so nice to see you. I know we haven't talked. You and I have had a couple chats here and there over the last couple of years, but we haven't talked in a little bit. So I'm excited to catch up and get all of your wonderful wisdom out to the podcast audience as well.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. You know why?
Why?
Because I didn't have to come up with a list of questions and be prepared to answer. So we're just going to, as you said, we're just going to talk.
Yep. Very organic around here. And so I do have 3 questions that you wouldn't already know about that we'll start off with, but hopefully they're not. These questions can actually be difficult questions to answer sometimes, but they're who are you? What is your work? And why do you do it?
Okay. Who I am is, my name is Laura Burford. You might see it as Laura Dallas Burford. Dallas being my maiden name. So it stays around there because I wrote under Dallas for so many years. And what I do is, I say nowadays, I work with that solo independent worker who wants to be their own boss. They have that experience, they have that expertise, they have their magic, but they don't know how to be a consultant. Many of them have been in the corporate world, and I'm sure you've seen this based on what you do. They get that first engagement, that first freelancing engagement because somebody referred them. And then they might get the second one. And then they hear crickets because they don't know what to do. So what I do is I work with them to get a framework in place so that they can work with clients as they create clients. And that's based on my philosophy, which says there's a consultant's blueprint. And that involves a couple of different things, which you can talk about more, but it involves a couple of different things. Why I do what I do? It's interesting. In 2016, a good friend approached me. And she was actually somebody that took one of my classes. She took a project management class I was giving for the Economic Development Council here in the Philadelphia area. And she approached me and she said, a lot of people are going out or trying to go out on their own and they're stuck. Can you talk to them about consulting? And at the time, I was setting up project management offices for corporations. And I was doing it because it's something I can do. It was okay, boring. You do a couple of them and you say, they're the same. And I started to listen to the noise. When I say I started to listen to the noise, I was trying to figure out why so many people were not looking for jobs anymore and wanting to go out and become their own boss. And then I started reading more about the future of work. Over time, I found I was spending more time working with individuals and giving away my time and not getting paid for my time. And you don't want to do that as a consultant, as a freelancer. So I started to offer a workshop, a 2-3-hour workshop that explained what is consulting. And people at first said to me, why are you charging for it? It's because if you don't charge, people don't take it seriously. And when I first started giving it, I wasn't charging a whole lot. I was charging enough to pay for the room, pay for the food, pay for the printing of materials because they weren't in person at the time. And the first time I offered it was 2 weeks before Christmas, and I sold out within 3 days. Now, sold out means 12 people, but within 3 days, that's not bad. 2 weeks before Christmas, I'll take that. And then I continued to give that workshop for a number of months afterwards. So why do I do what I do? In all honesty, I'm tired of seeing people who go out on their own fail. And they fail because they've never been trained. They don't have the education. They don't have somebody who can work with them and mentor them. So why do I do it? I want to see people succeed. I don't want to see people fail. And I will do everything within my power to help them succeed. What I can't do, there's that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I can't make them do the work if they don't want to do the work. But that's why I do it. I want people to be successful. So hopefully I answered those 3 questions, even though I rattled there a bit.
No, that's perfect. There's a lot there that I want to touch on. The first one is that, as you talked about, and this like totally resonates with my journey of becoming a consultant, is it like happened accidentally. So like this, like you gave this example of you get one and then you get another one, and then you're like, oh, I guess this is a thing. I guess this is what I do now. And then if you're not, you start bumping up against a place where you have to go from accidental to intentional,
Mm.
or it's not going to keep going. And so I'm like, and maybe this feeds into talking a little bit more about your consultant's blueprint too, is there is this, I think, sweet spot where people start to bump up against that, like, needing the intentionality around it, and that's where I think we get to this place where you have to, a lot of times from an accidental entrepreneur type of journey, those first few projects end up dictating your business model. That ends up dictating like what you do, what you call yourself, how you operate. And I see a lot of times we get into when you have to make that leap into like intentionality, like owning it, like I am a consultant, this is what I do. You have to flip that script a little bit and you have to be like, okay, now I have to really decide what I want to do, what I want my business model to be, who I want my clients to be, and backwards design it to start looking for those people
Right.
instead of expecting them to organically come to you.
Yeah, you're right. What happens is some sometimes it's the I call it the expert curse. Many times people who've gone out on their own and they get the first client, the second client, third client, they're doing whatever somebody has asked them to do because they have experience. But trying to narrow that down can be hard. Right? And you know this as well as I. You have to focus in on that niche or that one thing for which you want to be known. And that's not the easiest thing for people to do. And I tell people I made that mistake when I went out on my own. When I went out on my own, it was after 9/11, and I had lots of experience. I had 10 years with PwC. I had started international consulting operations. There were a lot of things I can do. But nobody pulled me aside and said, You're we don't get it. We don't get what you're trying to do. Until one chamber president pulled me aside and he said, You're the jack of all trades, but the master of none. You're good at what you do. Everything you do is good, but what do I tell people you do?
Yeah.
What is that one thing you want to be known for? And that's hard when somebody comes up to you and says that to you. But it took me a while to figure that out. My comment was, I had tons of training. How does somebody who hasn't had consulting training figure it out? It's not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
And I know you read some of my articles and you've seen some of my YouTubes. The one thing I talk about is you gotta have a solid business core. And your business core, your body has a core and it has to be solid, just like your business has a core. But it's also the opening scene in that movie. If you don't get that set up right, then everything else goes by the wayside. So your business core is your why, your what, your who, and your how. How are you going to do it? And it's not the tactics. It's your how starts strategically and then goes down to your tactics. If I turned around and said to you, Sarah, what do you want to be known for? I'm sure at times you can answer that.
Not always.
That's okay. I can't always answer it either.
Because I think it always, and I have a question about this too, but at least in my experience, it's constantly evolving. There's definitely um, like a core skill set or core background that we have. And then I love what you said too about the why, because I think that's super important and something that I think people overlook when they're just like, oh, this is something I can do and it's something that people pay me for. So that's the thing that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you encounter, because this was like definitely has been part of my journey and like the other solopreneurs that I coach as well, is especially from this like accidental entrepreneur type of place where someone comes in and they're like, this is the thing that I do because I don't know, that's just what people pay me to do. And like you said, your example with setting up PMO offices, I found over time that there's a lot of things that I can do, a lot of things that I'm really good at, several things that I think I'm better than most people at, that over time I was like, I've just been doing that because I'm really good at it. And so people will always pay me to do it. But like, I don't really like doing that. It's not the thing that I wanna stand for or be known for, but it's become such an ingrained part of who I am. Like, I've called myself, for example, a project manager for so long, and as me and my business evolves, I'm shifting more into, like, strategic, like, more operational, like, COO type of roles, but it's, like, hard to let that piece of it go. But again, that I didn't actually define that piece. It got defined for me because it was like, "Oh, this is what people are gonna pay me to do, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna build a business."
No, I get it. I get it. Because you don't know how many times, people have come back to me and said to me, "You're a great project manager." I said, "I haven't managed projects in years. I really haven't." But, uh, setting up an operation, just because there's a project aspect to it, doesn't mean that you're a project manager.
Mhm.
You're dealing with operations, but trying to get that out of the picture can be hard.
Yeah.
It can really be hard, and that's why it's always so important to constantly work on your business core. Somebody said to me, "I've defined it, now I'm done." I'm like, "No, you're never done. You're always refining it, and you always have to get it out of the picture." But yes, it's hard to change. Even when I started working with individuals to set up consulting operations, people kept coming back to me and saying, "Well, you have a solid project background. Why aren't you helping people with?" I said, "Because that's project management is a skill, and you're going to use that skill for whatever you do. But what are you doing? As a consultant, you're helping people solve a problem. What problem are you solving?
Yeah.
If you're using project management skills to help you with that, solve that problem, that's great. But you don't want to lead with that. You want to lead with the problem you're helping.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
yeah.
And that's, like, I think can be such a big, which, like you said, that I think is a key shift, especially when you go from working for someone else to working for yourself. Because when we work for someone else, like, we don't have to define that for ourselves, right?
No,
Like,
you don't.
tell us what we do, why we do it, all those things. Like, you don't have to figure any of that out when you work for other people. And when you start working for yourself, you take some of those tendencies with you and then have to learn, which is why I think the work that you do is so important because it is a completely different way of thinking about what you do. It is not the same as a job, and realizing that it's completely iterative, that what you do, what you wanna be known for is going to change and evolve over time, because I think, and myself included, a lot of times I'm like, "I wish that it could just be I could just set it, I could just do it, just be like, 'This thing works, I'm gonna do it forever.'" But I also think as entrepreneurs, we get bored, right?
Word,
That
yeah.
if you wanna do that, then go work for someone else. This might not be your path, but if you like the idea of being able to reinvent yourself and reinvent your business and solve new and more interesting problems as you continue to evolve, then that's, I think, the path of the
Consulting, freelancing, whatever. It's all the same. And think, and this is my opinion, I think when you work for a corporation, they tell you what you're going to do. They really do. And you can very easily get put in a spot, which you just said, of doing something that you're good at, but you don't want to do. And I know when I was in the corporate world, it happened. Hey, we need somebody who can do this, and we know you can do it. Can you do it? Deal. Like, yeah, but and then next thing you know, you get pigeonholed into that. I'm like, no.
yeah.
And then they wonder why people leave. I'm like, it's time to move on because I can't get out of this rut.
Yeah.
And the only way I can get out is to leave.
Yeah.
And I do that sometimes with people. We also don't, and this is something that I find freelancers, consultants, anybody that's that independent worker struggles with once they get past that core is we don't teach people how to build relationships. And freelancing and consulting are all relationship businesses.
Yes.
Yeah. You and I do some of the same things, which is great. I have no problem talking to you, and you have no problem talking to me because we have our differences. But the relationships, the partnerships, and we don't teach people how to do that. And we teach people, and so many people I've talked to who go out on their own say, I'm competing with them. I'm like, maybe you are, maybe you're not. But you, how you think about it, and your philosophy is different than the other person.
Mhm.
Yeah, and somebody who is a tax person, tax accountant, she said, I can't do this because there's somebody else who's doing the same thing and they're in the same town. And it's a local town. I said, not really. You're both different. I know both of you. You're both different. You both approach it differently. All she's going to do is do your year-end taxes. You want to meet on a quarterly basis. You want to do this. You want to do that. You have a whole different philosophy about it. And that's what makes you different and helps you stand out as that freelancer, that independent consultant, whatever you want to call yourself. It works. It
Yeah, I
works.
think that, and it goes back to what you said about the core of your business, because when you work for yourself, that has to be so unique to you, and it's this evolving piece of yourself that continues to iterate as it moves forward. It's different. Again, it's so different than a quote unquote job, because jobs are interchangeable, right? It's widgets. They can find 15 people to do a job, but there's only one me. There's only one you. And even if to a certain extent, we do almost the exact same thing, it's
Never the same.
there's so much, I think, especially now, like now and post COVID, now that everything is like virtual too, there's so much work to go around that I think like having that competitive mindset is only detrimental, because I think the best referrals that I get are from people who are quote unquote my competitors. Like, it's building those relationships that I think makes all of us so much more able to sustain ourselves and not only get work, but just operate in a system that's like mutually supportive, instead of to this place where we always have to feel like we have to compete with each other. I feel like that's another one of those, like, holdovers from, like, a corporate mindset that we end up just, like, internalizing, when that's not actually true, and that kind of belief actually ends up holding us back from succeeding.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was with PwC, one of the partners asked me to work with a client, and I said, "No." He's like, "Why not?" I said, "Because I'm not a good fit. Our personalities are gonna clash." "Yeah, but can't you help them?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can, but," and I mentioned somebody else, "is a better fit. And in the long run, it's gonna work out for everybody if you recommend and you use the other person."
Right.
And the partner was like, "Yeah, but this would keep you home in the Philly area." I said, "Yeah, believe me, I would love that. But let's do what's right for the client." And you have to think that way because it comes back.
Oh,
Comes
totally.
back.
Yeah.
I
It
ended
does.
up actually getting another engagement in the Philly area that was much better fit, and it was a longer engagement. So I wasn't complaining.
Yeah. I
You know?
mean, I think doing it sounds so cliche. Do the right thing, right? Do the right thing. I recorded a podcast last week, and my dear friends who run a freelance agency in Ireland said that they built their business by the mantra, do the right thing and the revenue will follow. And it sounds so cliche, but it actually is like the gut. You do the right thing by your clients and also by your peers and your colleagues, right? If you know that that particular client is going to be better served by someone else, it is in no one's best interest to take them on, because you're not going to have a successful engagement with them, which means they're not going to refer you to anyone else. They're not going to give you a good review. You're not like, it's not good for you, it's not good for them if you're not the right person to solve their problem. and it's not good for whoever that colleague is that would be a better fit to refer them to. So it's just like this mutually beneficial ecosystem that sort of happens organically when you operate by that principle.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not, you want to do the right thing. And that's what it comes down to.
Tell us a little bit more. I'd love to hear more about the consultant blueprint. So, whatever level of that feels helpful to share with us. But I think you touched on like the core of the business. Like, what are some of the other like high level things that folks should be thinking about?
There was a great, there was a great quote uh, by Mark Cuban. And I wish I had it sitting here, I would read it, but I'll give you the gist of it. And the gist is that he says when he starts a new business, he does everything himself. It's basically the gist. He wants to he's going to take care of the P&L. He's going to read the marketing plan. He's going to get his hands dirty, basically what it comes down to, and get involved in everything. Can he hire other people to do things? Yes. Will come when you want to hire people. It's really what the gist of the common quote was. Consultant's blueprint is a framework. It's saying, here is what you need to know as a consultant. And it actually works for anybody that's an independent worker. Here's what you need to know. And there's 7 things that you need to know. And I'll put it in really 4 categories, 4 pillars. The first is your business core, which is your focus, your ideal client, defining them, finding them, validating that your ideal client is interested in that one thing, and your point of view, which drives your services. And your point of view is that high level picture of how you're going to help your client achieve what they want to achieve. How you're going to get rid of that pain for them. That's the first pillar. The second is about building relationships, because being an independent worker requires you to build relationships. And that's your brand message. But I recommend independent consultants focus on 3 approaches first, and I call them active approaches. Targeted outreach, reaching out to the right people, networking, but networking strategically, and referrals, and doing it right. And then putting a plan in place so that you can work on that, all 3 of those approaches, and there's overlap every day, maybe 30 minutes, that's all, so that you can work with clients as well as create clients. I recommend people put what I call passive approaches or passive activities on the back burner until they get the active ones stabilized. The passive are things such as writing a blog article every day or focusing on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a tool, Facebook's a tool. So you want to be active and be out there, whereas passive activities require you to be found. Active, you take the initiative. Passive. So the second area is relationship building. The third area is engagement. How do you go through a discovery meeting, price, and put together a proposal? And the fourth area is how do you deliver with excellence? And that ties to your project manager.
Mhm.
How do you deliver with excellence? The 4 areas. Do you have to, over time, do everything in all those areas? No. You can hire people to help you. But as a consultant, you better understand each of those areas if you want to succeed. So that's the blueprint. So hopefully I didn't go into too much detail there. Enough.
No, I think that's great. What I feel like I might know the answer to this based on what we talked about in the beginning, but which piece of that blueprint do you find is the most like of all the people you've done this with, which piece of that blueprint do you think is the thing that people have the hardest time with?
Mm. I'm going to answer that it depends. And let me explain why I say it depends. For some people who have that experience and expertise and have what I call the experience curse, narrowing it down to one thing is a problem.
Okay.
People who have worked within the corporate world for a long period of time get that concept and can narrow it down. They struggle with relationship building. because they've always worked within this box, this
Mhm.
corporate world. They didn't get out there and network with associations or pick up the phone and call a business owner or go talk to somebody at another corporation. They've always been in that box of their own corporate world. So they've built relationships right in that little circle. But now they're required to go out and network and talk to people outside that circle. They've never done it. So I find some people really struggle there. The places where I don't find people struggle are with pricing, the
Okay.
discovery meeting, or deliver. And you don't know how many people come to me and they might come to you and say, I can't be a consultant because I can't figure out how to price. I'm like, that's the least of your worries. You can't tell me what you want to do.
Mhm.
You can't tell me who you want to talk to. Pricing is so far down the path. It's tactical. And I say to people that when you work for a consulting organization and you go in at the bottom level, bottom rung of the ladder, what do you do first? You work on delivery. You learn how to deliver right. And as you move up, the next thing you start to deal with is proposals and going through the discovery meeting and pricing. What's the last thing you get involved with? Defining who is the ideal client and what you're going to focus on.
That's
So,
it's so interesting. So when I first started creating content for freelancers, I created a course on project management because that was what I do. And I interacted with so many of my peers as freelancers where I was like, something in like they were amazing. They were great at what they did, like the content of what they did. I was like, there's no doubt in my mind that you're good at what you do. But like they would drop balls or like things were missing. And I was like, what's going on here? And so I created this course on project management. I sold almost none of them because what I learned over time, which is exactly what you're saying, which is so interesting because I never thought about it in those levels that you just described, is that there's sometimes a pain point around, to your point, with our own clients, figuring out the problem we solve for them. There's sometimes a pain point that's very visible where they feel like they are dropping balls, or they're like, I feel totally disorganized or whatever it is. But that's not actually the problem. Like the problem is underneath that, which is, like you said, as you go up those levels, and it's so interesting because what I hear you saying is when you work for other people, you work your way up those levels from the bottom, from doing to business development to designing the business, like the
yeah,
who.
till that advisory, strategic, high
Right.
level.
And then when you do it on your own, you have to do it. It's not that you don't, you hopefully already have the bottom part because hopefully you know what you're doing, but you actually have to start from the opposite side. You have to start at the part where, which is, like I said, resonates so much with my journey in coaching people and teaching people this kind of content as well, is that for so long, I thought I was like addressing the thing. I was like, oh yeah, this is the thing that people are struggling with. And over time, I was like, "Oh, no, we should go so far back into
Yeah,
that core that you talked about."
it's interesting that the number of people that once they get that focus and that ideal client, once they get all that ironed out, all of a sudden they start getting clients. And then they're saying, well, how do I build the rest? How do I get that relationship piece done? How do I deal with this? You'll get there. It
Yeah,
doesn't happen overnight.
yeah.
What you don't want to do is wait till everything's in place to get out there and get clients.
Yes, because I heard you say it in the beginning too, is the people who succeed at this are the ones who do the work.
Mhm.
And you have to do like, you can't you in again, going back to this comparison between working for someone else versus working for yourself, no one is here to give you the full-fledged map and then send you out into the world. You have to pick one piece of the map, this, and like we said, this core of your business, it's ideal client and like the problem that you solve for them. If you can get that dialed in, then everything else is a little, and even that is trial and error, right? As we said,
Oh,
that
yeah.
like evolves over time. But it's this perfect being enemy of the good thing that you only learn it by doing it and trying it and having amazing mentors like you who have been there before. But like you learned it by doing it and trying and failing and succeeding and figuring it out along the way.
And taking the approach, and I'm sure you've done this. I've tried something. You said you've done. I've tried something. I thought it would work.
Yep.
People said they were interested in it,
Yep.
but it didn't work.
Yep.
How many times do I try it again before I can it
Yep.
and say,
Yep.
it's time to move on?
Yeah, and that's the piece, like, that is the thing that I think separates those who succeed from those who fail in on the long term, because we all fail over and over again. But
No, we don't I say we don't fail. You know what we do? We learn.
it's true.
Mhm.
And that's the difference, I think, is if you see it as a failure instead of a learning and you give up on it instead of trying something again. And don't get me wrong, it is that mindset is incredibly difficult. It's like one of the things that I think is so hard about being a solopreneur is that it's never done. You are always trying something new. The thing that worked last year may not work this year, and or it still works, but you don't like it anymore. And
You're bored with it.
yeah, and so it's never done. And even though I feel like I thrive in that kind of an environment, I'm not gonna say that it's easy because there are definitely days where I'm like, "I just wish that, like, what worked last year still worked, and I could just keep doing it and not have to, like, reinvent myself." Sometimes the reinventing is very invigorating and is also, like, simultaneously, like, the hardest part of all of this.
Yeah. Or it's one day last week, my husband came home and he'd gone someplace, and I was outside working in the yard. And he looked at me, he said, "What are you doing out here? I thought you were going to write some emails and write a blog article." I said, "I was, but things weren't working the way I wanted them to." So I said, "Can it? I'm gonna go outside, the weather's nice, and I'm gonna get some exercise, and I'm doing stuff that we have to get done in the yard anyhow, and I'll
Yep.
get my frustration out on the yard." He's, "Oh," and he just left and went in the house and let me play out there. And I shouldn't say play, but play. But
Yeah.
sometimes that's what you have to do as an entrepreneur. You just say, "Hey, you know what? I need a break. I need to take that time. If
Yeah.
it's not working, put it aside. Come back to it."
I think that is the perfect piece of advice to leave us with. Thank you, and we'll definitely have you have so much wisdom to share on all of these, everything that touches independent work, so we'll definitely have you back on again real soon. But thank you for having this conversation with us,
Oh, I
and
enjoy it anytime.
thank you. I will say to what you just said, that I can't even remember how we first got connected. But there are some people I get connected to lots of people, as I'm sure you do too, and you have always been so incredibly generous with your time and support and, like, being totally open to always having these kinds of conversations, whether it's on the podcast or just, "Laura, I'm designing this new thing. Can I pick your brain about it?" And so I just wanna call that out because it has been just really lovely, and I think that we need to all be able to have those kind of people, those kind of, like, peer relationships in our life.
And you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to support one another. It can be lonely being on your own.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to pick up the phone and say, "I just have to bounce an idea.
Yeah.
Are you open to listening?"
Yeah. Thank you so much, Laura. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. And tell us a little bit more about where we can find you and what you're working on right now and what we should be keeping an eye out for.
Sure. Couple things that I'm working on right now. I'm reintroducing a program that I used to give. It's a workshop. I would give it prior to COVID. And the workshop is Explore Consulting. And it's for people who are thinking that they want to become a consultant, but they're really not sure. And it's a 3-hour workshop where we do some level setting as to what is consulting, what's going on in the world, some of the trends. And then we spend the majority of the time you, assessing you in 3 areas: personally, your knowledge and skills, and your support. And Sarah, how important support is. And then, based on that assessment, deciding one of 3 things. One, it is an option for you, and then we'll put together a 30, 60-day, 90-day plan. It's not for you, and that's great because now you can go look for a job. Or if you're still not sure, what can you do? So that's a workshop, and hopefully, depending how it goes, it'll be once a quarter. It is limited. The other thing that I continue to work on is my consulting mastery program. And that's for the person that has had a couple clients, they're stuck, they're stalled, they've hit that plateau, and they need to get that framework in place, a framework that works for them. So there are two things, but how can you find me? Just do an internet search and my name does come up. Go to Laura's Consulting Guide. There are free resources for consultants there. There's a YouTube channel and there are videos on the YouTube channel. The videos are all aimed at helping people succeed as a consultant. Pretty easy to find by just doing an internet search.
Perfect. And we
Oh,
will
if you want to send me an email, please feel free. And the email address is super easy. It's laura@lauraburford.com. Can't make it much easier.
Perfect. We'll make sure to link all those things and put all that information in the show notes and on YouTube where when we post this on YouTube. But thank you again so much for your time. I
Thank
really
you.
having this conversation with you.
We can talk some more on another one.
Oh, of course. We'll definitely have you back on.